So in the previous classes, we have seen stress strain relations, right? And there is one important topic, very small topic, but very important topic has been left over. And that is nothing but the temperature effects of thermal stresses. So we call it as thermal stresses. Okay, fine. So why do we, all of you please switch off your microphones. So why do we have this thermal stresses developed? What is the reason for the thermal stresses to be developed? Okay, see, normally whenever there is rise in temperature, whenever there is rise in temperature, we know that there will be thermal expansion taking place. Whenever there is rise in temperature in a particular material, you know, there is thermal expansion. Okay, and this is very common to all of us. You know, this is physics, and we know that whenever a particular material's temperature is increased, then thermal expansion will takes place. There is a probability that the material gets expands. Okay, so this is what I just wanted to, you know, tell you. But how these thermal stresses be developed, this is very important, because see, let us suppose I have a simple bar like this of length L, and whenever I heated this bar, so what happens, the length of this bar may increase. Let us say this is delta L, small what we call small change in length. Okay, so what is then strain? Then strain is delta L by L. But remember, this deformation or this change in length L is not because of this delta L, is not because of the loading, is not because of the loading, or not because of the forces, external forces, not because of the external forces. This delta L is because of temperature rise. This delta L is just because of temperature rise, and this is not normal strain, but this is thermal strain, because this strain has occurred in the body because of the rise in temperature, because of the rise in temperature, right? Hope you guys understand what I'm saying. So whenever you have a material and its temperature increases, or for that matter, if the temperature decreases, so that is the reason we call delta T. It should be generally called as delta T. Okay, whenever a material temperature gets increased or decreased, there will be thermal expansion. I mean, expansion in the sense either it may expand or contract depending on the rise in temperature or fall in temperature. So whatever it may be, what I mean to tell you is whenever you have this change in temperature, then obviously there will be change in length, delta L. So definitely there will be strain developed in the material. So that is what we call thermal strain. We call this as thermal strain because this strain is not because of the external forces or some loading conditions, right? This strain is because of the rise in temperature. This strain is just because of the rise in temperature, right? So that is the reason we call it as thermal strain. And now you know what is normal strain vector. What is normal strain in 3D, 3 dimension? What is normal strain? Epsilon, denoted by epsilon. So what is epsilon in 3 dimension? Yes, epsilon is, what is epsilon? Epsilon x, epsilon y, epsilon z, gamma xy, gamma yz, gamma xz, xz transpose. Actually, I need to write in a column because it is a vector. Strain is a vector, right? I need to put a column. I need to write in a column matrix, but I just wanted to write in a row matrix, and I put transpose. So both are the same. So this is my normal in general strain. This is general strain. In this I have 3 normal strains and 3 shear strains. Okay, fine. But how do we define this thermal strain? how do we define this thermal strain? Okay, so this is important. This is important. This change in length, per unit length, per unit original length, which is strain, is not because of the loading conditions, but because of the temperature rise or change in temperature, and hence it is called thermal strain. Okay, so if it is normal strain, then we can simply say it's a general strain. Either it can be a normal strain or shear strain. It is general strain, epsilon. But this is thermal strain. It is not general strain, right? So it is denoted by, or let us first see how this thermal strain is developed. Okay. So whenever there is, let us suppose, thermal strain, right? One second. So this thermal strain is no longer strain. This is thermal strain. So not, general strain is denoted by epsilon, but this thermal strain is denoted by epsilon naught. Okay. Now, okay. So now you'll just look at this. So thermal strain is because of whenever the rise in temperature, or I'll write in this color, the rise in temperature, or rise or fall, increase or decrease, I should say delta T. Okay, don't confuse delta T, whether it is increase or decrease in temperature. Whenever you have change in temperature, that is more appropriate to call. Whenever the change in temperature, delta T results in a uniform strain, which depends on the coefficient of linear expansion, and we know that is denoted by alpha, coefficient of linear expansion alpha of the material. Okay, so whenever you have rise in temperature or whenever you have change in temperature delta T, it results in a uniform strain. Why? We have already seen why that. Because of that rise in temperature, that what happens whenever you have rise in temperature, what happens? There will be thermal expansion, right? There will be change in length. So change in length per original length, we call it as strain. Okay, so whenever we have a rise in temperature, or we should say whenever we have change in temperature results in a uniform strain, which depends on the coefficient of linear expansion. How much strain or how much change in length, it depends on the thermal expansion of the material, of the material, right? Which is what we call alpha. It depends on the alpha of the material, right? So epsilon naught in 3 dimension is, because general strain is, we have already seen epsilon x, epsilon y, epsilon z, gamma xy, gamma yz, and gamma xz. But thermal strain epsilon naught is alpha into delta T, comma alpha into delta T, comma alpha into delta T, comma 0, 0 transpose. Okay, I'm supposed to write this in column, but I'm just writing, I wrote a row matrix and I have put a transpose. Okay, so this is epsilon naught in 3 dimension. Fine. Now, what about the stress strain relation here? What about the stress strain relation? Then if there is no thermal strain, then you can simply say sigma is equal to D into epsilon, or in this case If it is one dimension, then in place of D, in place of this constitutive matrix, you will simply get E, which is Young's modulus. Sigma is equal to E into epsilon for one dimension. Or for 2D, or 3D, then what happens? For 2D or 3D, you'll get constitutive matrix D. And again, in two dimension, you have two forms. One is plane stress and the other one is plane strain, right? Plane stress and plane strain. Okay, so this is, it is valid. Sigma is equal to D into epsilon, that is the stress strain relation, valid only when there is no thermal strain. If there is thermal strain, then sigma is equal to D into epsilon is not valid. Is not valid because in this strain you're not accounting thermal strains. You're not accounting the strain which is developed because of the rise in temperature. It is general strain. Epsilon x, epsilon y, for if you consider three dimension, then epsilon x, epsilon y, epsilon z, gamma x y, gamma y z, gamma x z transpose. But where is thermal strain? You're not considering the thermal influence of it. So whenever you have thermal strain, if thermal strain exists, then sigma is equal to D into epsilon minus epsilon naught. Sigma is equal to D into epsilon minus epsilon naught. And you have, for three dimension, epsilon naught is epsilon x, epsilon y, epsilon z, gamma xy, gamma yz, gamma xz transpose, right? Fine. Now you listen here, listen carefully. Then this epsilon naught, this is epsilon. Then what about epsilon naught in three dimension? Epsilon naught I have already written alpha delta t, alpha delta t, alpha delta t, 0, 0, 0 transpose. Right? Then D matrix 3 by 3, 6 by 6 matrix, which you got for this three dimension, and you also got sigma in three dimension, sigma x, sigma y, sigma z, tau x y, tau y z, tau x z, right? But for 2D, again for 2D, whenever you have thermal strain, then sigma is equal to D into epsilon minus epsilon naught. In 2D, you have first plane stress. In that, epsilon naught becomes alpha delta t 0 transpose. So for that, in 2D, for plane stress, because in 2D you have two conditions, one is plane stress and the other one is plane strain. In plane stress, epsilon naught becomes alpha delta t 0. And for in 2D, for plane stress, D matrix is E by 1 minus, which we have already, D for plane stress. You already know. You can go back to the lectures and you can see what is D matrix for plane stress. And what is epsilon for 2D? For two dimension, epsilon becomes epsilon x, epsilon y, gamma xy. What about this sigma for 2D? Sigma x, sigma y, tau xy. If you consider only xy plane. If it is yz plane, then sigma y, sigma z, tau yz. If it is xz plane, sigma x, sigma z, tau xz. Similarly, here also changes correspondingly. I'm considering xy plane. That is the reason I have written in this way. Generally, we consider xy plane. Okay. In two dimension, you can consider any plane. You can consider either xy plane, yz plane, or xz plane. It's up to you. But what I mean to tell you is, in two dimension, you have plane stress and plane strain. You know D and you know epsilon, you know sigma already, right? But how epsilon naught changes, how your thermal strain changes. So for plane stress, epsilon naught is alpha delta t 0 transpose. For plane strain, epsilon naught is same, but you will have what you have to multiply with 1 plus nu. 1 plus nu into alpha delta t 0, right? So So you have to substitute there. In place of epsilon, you know epsilon x, epsilon y, gamma xy. In place of D, you know either it is plane stress or plane strain. If it is plane stress, D matrix is E by 1 minus nu square into 1 nu 0, nu 1 0 0 0, 1 minus nu by 2. If it is plane strain, D matrix is E by 1 plus nu into 1 minus 2 nu into 1 minus nu, nu 0, nu 1 minus nu 0, 0 0, 0 0.5 minus nu. Okay. So this is it. Okay. Whenever you have in the problem, if it is, if the problems in the problem statement, if it is defined that there is rise in temperature in the material, then you have to consider the plane strain also. If you simply consider sigma is equal to D into epsilon, no, this is not valid. This is not valid because you're not considering the thermal strains. So in order to incorporate the thermal strains, you have to consider sigma is equal to D epsilon minus D into epsilon minus epsilon naught, or you can also write it as sigma is equal to D epsilon minus D epsilon naught. Whatever it is, it's up to you. But in general, epsilon and epsilon naught will be the same order, right? So it is better to write D into epsilon minus epsilon naught. Okay. Epsilon, you know, for 2 dimension, it is simply, if you consider xy plane, epsilon x, epsilon y, gamma xy. Epsilon naught, it changes for plane stress or plane strain. It is not same for both, right? So it's epsilon naught for plane stress is alpha delta t 0. For plane strain, epsilon naught is 1 plus nu into alpha delta t 0. And let me give you an interesting, you know, note of this planes, this thermal stresses, right? So one second. Okay, so in US on a fine sunny day, the tracks which are normally in this way, the railway tracks, locomotive tracks, which are normally in this way, on one day, on a fine sunny day morning, they found the tracks to be in this way. You know, it seems like a giant monster has come and it has, you know, pulled up the tracks, railway tracks. But it is not. You know, it's just a physical phenomena which happened. You see, these are riveted. You know, these are the constraints. They cannot move. So whenever you have this thermal, whenever you have this rise in temperature on a hot sunny day, in California, I think this has happened. And you know, the temperatures are very, very high in that particular state of US. So what happened is the temperature rise is enormous. The temperature rise is enormous. That what happened is the thermal expansion took place inside the material, and it cannot go in a longitudinal way because these are already constraints. Okay, actually the thermal expansion has to take place in that particular direction, but because these are constraints, this is forced to move in this direction, in the lateral direction, forced to move in the lateral direction. That is the reason you might see this I mean the tracks being torn apart in that way, in the deformation in the lateral direction. Now, why I'm saying this, why I'm saying all these things is because you have to understand, because whenever we design, if you think that it is appropriate to consider the rise in temperature inside the material, or in your problem statement, if you think that it is appropriate to have, you know, to consider the rise in temperature, then you have to be very careful, because whenever you find that there will be rise, or in particular there will be change in temperature, then thermal strains will be developed. So in your design, you have to be very careful to incorporate those strains, and in that case sigma becomes D into epsilon minus epsilon naught. Okay, so you do not get stresses, you know, directly using sigma is equal to D into epsilon, right? So this is because of the thermal strain. There is change in length, there is deformation, there is change in length. It is because of the rise in temperature. It's just because of the rise in temperature delta T is because of the rise in temperature delta T. Okay, I hope you guys understand what I'm saying, or you can Google it, you will find it. Okay, thermal expansion of railway tracks, you can just go through that, you can see. So in these places it is very much clear to understand that whenever, for example, you have a bridge, very high bridge, a bridge will be constantly in exposure to you know the sun. Obviously the temperature may rise or temperature may even decrease, right? There will be definitely change in temperatures of the structure, right? So you have to consider the thermal strains. Okay, otherwise the structure may fail. So it is very, as if you consider the problems, in the problem it will be clearly stated, I mean it will be stated like the rise in temperature of this particular bar or whatever it is. So then you can understand, okay, there is rise in temperature, that means there will be thermal strains. So sigma is no longer equal to d into epsilon, no, sigma will be equal to d into epsilon minus epsilon naught. Okay, so this is how we deal. Fine. Now with this we have completed the stress strain relations. Okay, with this we have completed the stress strain relations. Let's move on to the next topic. Okay, just a moment. See, I hope you understand that we didn't enter into finite element method until now, right? We didn't enter into finite element method. We didn't started finite element method. We didn't had any discussion of finite element method until now. We have, we just, it's a kind of review of what we actually know. That's it. Because why I have chosen these stress strain relations and all these things is because the loadings and all these things is because mostly you have structural problems in your syllabus, mostly structural problems. So that is the reason the syllabus is also framed in such a way that you will have what we call a good exposure to all these stress strain relations and all this. Okay, and that is the reason your the first part of the unit is completely dedicated to the stress strain relations and all that. Okay, strain displacement relations and all that. Fine. Now now we are not actually entering into finite element method, but in one way we are about to enter into finite element method now. Okay, but let me tell you, okay, let me have this. So I may have an algebraic equation or integral equation or differential equation. Okay, fine. I may solve this using two ways. Either I may solve this using analytical method, or I may solve this using numerical method. I may solve this using analytical method, or I may solve this using numerical method. Just a moment.
సార్ వీడియో అయిపోయింది.
Yes, just a moment. Okay. So I may solve these equations using analytical method or numerical method. Again, in an analytical method, I have two important methods. One is exact method and the other one is approximate method, right? I may solve it using exact method or I may have some approximate methods. But let me tell you, exact methods are actually, they are the actual closed methods. For example, if you take a differential equation, and you solve it using any mathematical method, then that is your exact method, right? You will get the exact solution at any point. Let us say, for example, I have a, a beam like this. I'll write it here. Let us suppose I have a beam like this, okay, with some loading, and this is my domain. The length of the span of the beam is L. So that is my domain is 0 to L. Okay. If I can have the differential equation, I can have the mathematical model of this particular beam, and if I solve that differential equation, I'll get the displacements, I'll get the solution. If I solve it using any of the mathematical method, then that is called what we call exact method. Okay, because why we call exact is at any point within the domain I will get the solution. And not only that, at any point within the domain 0 to L, within the length, I can get the solution, I can get the displacement, but I will get the exact solution at any point. You understand, there are two important things. One is I'll get the exact solution, and the other one is I'll get at any point within domain 0 to L. At any point within domain, I'll get the solution and I will get the exact solution. That is the reason we call these as exact methods. And the other method, of course, it comes under analytical, because we are not using any numerical method. It comes under analytical itself, but we may approximate the solution. Sometimes that approximate solution may be exact. Let us suppose if you are arranging a dinner party, and you say you approximate that, okay, I have invited 50 number of people, 50 number of people, and you say, okay, 45 members may attend, and it may happen that exactly 45 members may attend your party, right? Then your approximation becomes the exact solution. Or otherwise, maybe 46 or 45 or 44 may attend. Then you say, okay, it's quite approximate, right? So that is what is called approximate. Okay, in this approximate solutions, you have three methods again. One is Rayleigh method, the other is Rayleigh-Ridge method, and the other one is weighted residual method. Rayleigh method, Rayleigh-Ridge method, weighted residual method. These are the approximate methods, right? And remember, this weighted residual method, again, maybe these are subdivided as collocation method. We also call it as point collocation method, subdomain collocation method, and Galerkin method, and last one is least squares method. Okay, hope you guys could able to see what I'm writing. Okay, fine, just a moment. Fine. Okay. So these are approximate methods, but they are analytical. That means you do not get the exact solution. You may not get the exact solution, but you will get the solution at any point within the domain. You will get the solution at any point within the domain. So those are called analytical methods, because you are getting the solution at any point. At any point. Whereas we will discuss all these methods. We will discuss all these methods. Don't worry. But these are, an analytical method can be divided into exact methods, which we get exact, where we get exact solution for the entire domain at 0 to L at any point 0.3 L at any point 9 point, I mean 0.9999 L at any point you will get the solution. Now listen. Whereas in exact you will get the exact solution. In approximation you will get the solution again at any point, but that would be, may not be exact solution, but it is very close to exact solution. That means what we call the approximate solution. But numerical, in numerical methods you have methods like finite difference method, finite element method. I hope you know this. Finite volume method. And not only this, we have another methods also. We have another methods also, but these are the most predominant methods: finite difference method, finite element method, finite volume method. And now we know we are in this finite element method, right? So what numerical method does is, it will not give you, it is not at all exact solution. It will never give you the exact solution. Numerical method will never give you the exact solution, and nor it will give you the solution at any point. No, it will not give you solution within the domain. No, it will give you the solution at some points within the domain which you already fix. It will give you the solution only at some points within the domain which you already fix. So that is the difference between numerical method and analytical method. And in analytical method, whether it is exact solution or approximate solution, you will get the solution along the domain at any point within the domain. If it is exact solution, it is exact, or if it is approximate solution, it is approximate. But the thing is, you will get the solution at any point within the domain. But whereas numerical solution, you will get the solution at only some fixed points. Those fixed points, of course, are called nodes. We'll discuss later on. But you will fix those points, and only at those fixed points you will get the solution. Okay. Now these are the predominant numerical methods, and we are now dealing with finite element method. And of course, before entering into finite element method, in this first unit, that the later concepts of the first unit, now we'll discuss about these approximate methods. We'll discuss about Rayleigh method and weighted residual method, which we are going to see in the upcoming lectures. Okay, thank you so much for listening. Thank you all.